What's up, people? Welcome to my studio. I've just got a new release out this week. Came out on Monday exclusively on Juno Download on Low Pitch Records. It's called Concrete Shadows back with Rootmaster. So go and check that out. It came out on Monday on Juno exclusively. It will be out everywhere else on the 5th of February. Today, after my last video, which showed you how to make the organ bass from the track I did with Sebastard, I thought I would make this a tradition. Every time I put new music out, I'm going to do some tutorials related to it. So this one is going to be all about sub bass and how to manage your sub bass. So let's get started with some absolute basics. There are many ways to manage sub bass, okay? You can either have a separate track with your sub bass on, which should be a synth playing a sine wave or a square wave with a low pass filter on. I prefer to use that one because sine waves on their own can sound a bit empty. So I have a sub track on this. This by the way is Rootmaster from this EP. Let me just play you a bit of this track before I get into the tutorial. So basically this started out as a basic ass UK funky tune with as many UK funky cliches as possible shoved into it. So it's got everything. It's got the horns, it's got the hammer basses, it's got the snare pattern, it's got the Phrygian mode. It's basically, yeah, everything grime at 130 BPM. So the sub bass on this is in a track called Sub, and the sub track sounds like this by itself. This is from the first drop. Okay, so that follows the melody of the various synths that we're playing throughout the drop. I'm using the ES1 for this, which is a really basic ass synth, but it's okay for sub bass. This is basically just a square wave with a really low filter on. That gives you a bit of a fuller sound than using just a sine wave. You know, the sine wave can more easily get lost. You've got a few quiet upper harmonics if you do it this way. There are other ways of doing it. Okay, one friend of mine in a Mutant Bass chat recommended me this plugin called Ambassador, and I'm going to show you what that sounds like now. So here is the main brass line, which that sub line is following. Okay, I'm going to just loop that first bar. Okay, and we're going to put a Ambassador. Right, okay, before we do this, one other thing about your sub bass, it must be mono. Okay, your sub bass must be mono. If you are using plugins like the ES2 or Massive that spread various oscillators and then kind of at different times and cancel each other out, there is a very high chance that those plugins will then spread that in stereo. Let me see if I can show you what I mean quickly. So I'm going to load up an ES2 instance now. Let me just mute the piano. All right. So this is I'll do a similar kind of sub bass sound to what I did here. So I'm going to put this down low, one oscillator only. Right. And then put it through this kind of hammer low pass filter here. Right, and let's just turn off that cutoff. Right. There we are. Okay, so there's our sub bass. Now, if I put that in mono, and now if I switch on this thing which makes multiple voices play in unison, let me just do like 3. You can already see there that it's uneven in the stereo image. And the reason for that is that when you do this kind of thing, it inserts phasing into the sound and spreads it over the stereo image even when you don't ask it to. So the way of fixing this in the ES2 specifically is to put this from free to soft, and then put the filter reset on, and suddenly you can see it's mono again. In other synths, it might work differently. Preferably, you should be using a mono instance of a synth for something like this, which is why I use the ES1 rather than the ES2 for my sub bass, because the ES2 can only be loaded in stereo, whereas the ES1 has a mono option. So that's the preferable thing. If you can't do that, there's ways inside the synth of making sure that the sound is mono. Anyway, back to what I was saying. You need to make sure that your sub is mono. So already, if you are adding Ambassador, which is basically a plugin which adds sub bass to another sound, on a stereo track, you are playing with fire. But I have tested this, and I think that it does put the sub in mono. So here, I've switched off the bass and switched on the sub. Okay, and if I play this over this brass now, it should also play a sub over it. Without the plugin. With. Okay. Okay, you can put this is some kind of filter, that range thing. So if you put that a bit higher, it puts the filter a bit higher. Right, now the one thing that this doesn't do very well is it doesn't keep the sub bass within one octave. If you have a sub bass following another bass line, then the sub should be within one octave. This bass line is going like that, and this note, this E up here, is too high for a sub oscillator to really play audibly, so you're not really hearing it. And that is why the sub in this track does this. Okay? For that E at the top here, I'm making it play this note instead. So rather than the sub is going like that. Now, here's the next thing, right, with sub bass. If you're making music to be played on a club sound system, you want your sub to be as low as possible, but not too low. So I polled a bunch of producers on Facebook this week about how low the too low was. And I think it kind of depends on whether you expect your music to be played on small PA systems or big rigs. If you expect it to be played on big rigs, then a lot of people feel comfortable going down to this D here. Sorry, I'll just turn the piano off. Going down to this D here, right? So that's D two octaves below middle C, this one. If you don't, I would recommend saying that the lowest note you can play is the E above it. You might feel comfortable maybe going down to the E flat or D sharp. Definitely this C is too low. When I play this note, you're not really hearing that note, which is about 30 something hertz, like 32 hertz or something. You're not actually hearing that note, you're just hearing higher overtones of it, like the ones that go like. So definitely keep your sub bass within one octave and start that octave somewhere down here. Okay, it should start from the D or maybe the E, or if you're feeling really scared of your sub not being heard on a really small system, maybe the F. But definitely it should be somewhere around here. So just showing you this on the piano roll, your sub bass should stay like within this range. Or if you're feeling really brave, maybe this range. It should probably not go any lower than this. Any lower than this D. Going back to our track, what the Ambassador was trying to do is it was trying to automatically add this sub bass line under my brass part. But you couldn't hear this note because it's too high. So it should definitely have gone like that. So basically, this is how I work with sub bass. There are other ways. if you're making music which uses lots of pitch bend on the bass lines, then the Ambassador is definitely a good plugin to use. But if you're making stuff which has bass lines that move about a lot like that, then you probably want to be writing your sub bass in by hand and making sure that it's in one octave low, but not too low. Now, the next thing is that a lot of people feel that the bottom of the sub bass octave is the best place for the sub bass to hit on the club sound systems. So usually that translates to something like this E or F, right? And lots of people end up making their music in these keys. One myth I want to bust is, two myths I want to bust actually. The first myth I want to bust is that is somehow cheating, because it isn't. That's what musicians have been doing for ages. You write for the most resonant key of your instrument, and in our case, as dance music producers, the instrument we are writing for is the club sound system. In fact, that is what the music is reproduced on. So, classical composers, when they wrote for violin, they tended to write in keys like D and G because of the way the violin strings are tuned, which is to these notes. Okay, so you have G, D, A, and E, which makes this D or A or G a very resonant key for a violin to play in because of how the open strings are tuned. And an open string always sounds fuller than a string which has been dampened by a finger. So it's all about which pitches are resonant. And in our case, as dance music producers who write music to be played through a club sound system with lots of sub bass, this E and F are very resonant pitches. It doesn't mean that you have to stick to those keys. You might have noticed that this track is in A, which is quite high, but the bass line does drop down to this E a lot, okay? So this is where I'm going to introduce you to the second track in on this EP. So the second track on this EP is called Concrete Shadows. And harmonically, this piece is pretty simple. It's just many voicings of this chord, B flat minor major 7. So it goes like... So, stuff like that. Let me play you a bit from it. So we are here. This is our tonal center, B flat, which, as we said, because the most resonant subnotes on the system are E and F, is quite high, but it drops into F. And the reason that works is that B flat and F are a fifth apart. And I hope you've studied your harmonic series. I know you haven't, but it goes like this, doesn't it? So that is very close to the bottom of the series and is a very usable pitch in relation to our tonal center of B flat. So it drops to F. I was listening to some old tracks recently and I came across this, which similarly, the question of what key this song is in is actually quite philosophical. You could make a case for it being in F or in B flat, but let's say that it's in B flat for this. It goes like. Yeah, so you could make a case for that, for this being the center or for this being the center. I'm not going to have that discussion now, but This is a good example of how to exploit this sub-bass sweet spot down the bottom in a song which is in a key much higher up than there. So listen to how the bass behaves in the drop.
Say what's the come, sorry love. You see, I've had difficulties too many times before, and right now it's not really my thing. He said just give me 2 minutes of your time and tell me what you like me to be offering. It's not that easy, it's not that easy. These days can't find a man to please me. Their lines are far too cheesy. No boys on a level, believe me. No boy.
So you've probably heard the bass it's not even touching the B flat. It's just moving between the F and the G flat here. So I you know, not knowingly, but I've done something quite similar here with this, right? So this is in B flat. It revolves around that one chord. You only need one chord, right? You only need one chord in our music. You don't need to have a chord progression. You just need to experiment with voicing the chord on noises that make evoke the right emotion that you want to express with it. And it just focuses on this one chord. That's it. And it drops. Like that. It's within this sweet spot, the sub bass, and therefore you can make it work. Whether I have made it work, that's up to you to decide. Go on Juno, check the EP, Low Pitch Records, Concrete Shadows back with Rootmaster, out this Monday, 22nd of January, exclusively on Juno. You'll see it everywhere else on the 5th of February. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you've learned something today. See you soon. Peace out.
This one.